So our next speaker is Justin Cruz LeDuc. And Justin spent a considerable amount of time scoping out scripts and scoping out our program before getting here. I wouldn't say stalking, definitely. But he gave a lot of attention to plotting his arrival, reaching out to folks like Dr. Jen Smith and Dr. Stuart Sandin, who I know are sort of heroes of his as world-renowned coral scientists. And he got his dream. He got to work with Dr. Jen Smith for this project, and we're really excited that he was able to be here and fulfill that dream. So Justin is one of the key leaders in the aforementioned a cappella band called the Acapelicans. And he also, in his spare time, loves cooking traditional Guatemalan dishes with his father. So the name of Justin's presentation today is The Comeback, Life After Death in the Acropora genus.
Thank you, Samantha. I was born in the beautiful island of Puerto Rico. And when I was young, I lived very close to the beach. We would take any opportunity, Christmas, birthday parties, to go to my uncle's little house on the beach, not even on the beach, on top of the water. And we would have a great time. Together with my grandfather, he would take us out on his boat, snorkeling ever since I was very young. And occasionally, my grandfather would take out big chunks of coral out of the water, not to study them or anything, but to use them as door stands. Very young, I was like, Grandpa, won't that kill the coral? Haven't you seen how many there are? And I was like, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of coral. So I love the ocean and love spending time with my family and watching coral. But one time around the year 2000, I was still very young, and I started noticing something weird, something that I had never seen before. Coral started turning white. And I was like, wow, this is very, very, very pretty. I started asking people what was happening, and a couple of months later, I realized that they were dead, these corals. And I asked my teachers, I asked my parents, my grandfather. They didn't know. They were like, well, there was an internet. Well, there was internet, but I didn't have access to internet. I didn't have access to Wikipedia, so I was like, okay, so I think they're dead. Nobody knows what's happening. So 5 years later, 2005, similar event. Coral started turning white. I'm like, 2 times in a row, I've discovered something and nobody's talking about this. So I was a little bit older, and I was able to access scientific literature that I understood nothing. In the literature, it said bleaching. And I was like, aha. So I figure out what's causing the death of the coral. And yes, so in my mind, for several weeks and months, I was like, I can't believe so many people are pouring their Clorox in the water. I didn't understand this. But no, apparently bleaching is a terminology used to talk about how the coral stresses when it has a disease, or in major cases, climate change and the heating of the oceans. It causes the coral to stress, it bleaches, and surely after that, it dies. So my research continued. I also, in those literatures, I figured out that the coral that I was stalking and studying was from the genus Acropora, or Acropora. So what was so special about this coral? I started to try to figure out what was going on. It turns out that Acropora is very, very special genus. Acroporas are one of the most widespread coral in the world. From subtropical to tropical areas, they're usually found within the first 10 meters of the water column. Some of them go deeper, but they're usually in that shallow area. They like the sun. Very widespread. There's a lot of species within this genus, 370 species out of 800 total coral, around that number, coral species. So there are a lot. they're very diverse morphologies. They can change in color, they form plates, they form different forms, mixed forms of a coral. Even within the same species, they can change color. This is one of my favorite colors. The common name of this is the Disney Magic Kingdom. You can kind of tell why it's called like that. It's very expensive if you want it for your aquarium. So they range in different colors and forms. Between both Acropora and Montipora, another group of corals, they make up 1/3 of building coral species. When we talk about building coral species, we're usually talking about the corals that take out calcium from the water and make these 3D structures. And even after they die, they serve as a place where other corals can grow. And they can grow fast. So that's one characteristic of this entire group. They all grow in different states, but what is fast? Fast is very fast compared to a coral. So these corals can practically duplicate their size within a year if the conditions are necessary. So you might think like, well, big deal, my tree can grow faster. But remember that these are taking out calcium out of the water, and even if they die, the structure will still be there for other corals. So sometimes they can make big coral reefs. So Acropora in the Caribbean, what was I observing? There's only 2 species in the Caribbean, very limited from those over 300 species that I talked before. There's 1 hybrid. They're so similar that they can produce the same offsprings in cases. They used to cover 30 to 50% of the bottom floor. Now, this used to be around the 80s. Sadly, that's not the case because out of that number, we only have 3% left. So I was definitely making observations that were happening in the entire Caribbean. They were massively bleaching and later dying. So this mass bleaching event that happened in the Caribbean and in a lot of places of the world created quick notice, especially for the Americans. We quickly started making policy and changing the way we react towards coral. 2006, we put them in the Endangered Species Act. It was the first coral ever to be put in the Endangered Species Act. 2008, critical habitat for the elkhorn coral and staghorn corals, which are 2 species from the Caribbean. They established a critical habitat for them. 2012, proposed reclassifications of that same coral from threatened to endangered. And finally, in 2015, they created a management plan for the Caribbean for those two species. So what do we know? We know that there's 10 species in the Endangered Species Act, 8 species are threatened in the Pacific, 2 species endangered in the Caribbean, 97% has declined in the Caribbean, and since 2016, half of all the coral in the Great Barrier Reef has died. So this has not only happened in the Caribbean, it's happened in other places. So what did I do? So I was lucky enough to partner with the 100 Island Challenge team. They're a group of scientists here in Scripps, and they have a lot of data from different parts of the world. They take images, and then they analyze how the coral are doing in those places. One of the areas that they do research was Palmyra Atoll, which was a great place for me to do the study on Acropora because it's a place that hasn't been disturbed a lot. Nobody lives here, only than like 3 to 20 scientists year-round. So they had different plots, and in those different plots, they studied those different plots from 2014 to 2017. They have images, and those plots were from 10 to 10 meters, and that's an example of one of the plots, and you can see the square. It's 10 by 10, and my job was to identify these Acropora and digitize them, and then quantify how much percentage was in the bottom floor. So my hypothesis, being Palmyra a relative undisturbed location of Acropora species, might have a slightly better survival rate after a bleaching event in comparison to more impact locations like the Caribbean and Australia. The goal was to compare Acropora population compare populations in Palmyra Atoll across the years. I wanted to understand what would happen to Acropora in a place that wasn't disturbed by humans. So this is the first picture, picture 2014. If you're not able to identify the coral, they're kind of in the dark areas, but we digitize them. And the red ones are the ones we are studying. They are from the genus Acropora. So that was our base knowledge of this, of the coral. 2004, 2015, they all bleach, mass bleaching event. They happen in a lot of places. This is the place where we all do like, oh. So they all die. Thank you. They all died. That photo is not overly exposed, but they all, so what was expected for them, a lot of them to die. 2016, apparently they did not die. A lot of the percentage stayed the same. That was, okay, that's good, that's good. Let's see what happens later. 2017, they grew way more. Thank you. This is amazing, by the way. If you don't, okay? If you can take something, this is amazing. A lot. So the before and after pic, I'm going to show you the before, 2014. Very good, very good. Oh. So they're coming back. So this is my little, I know you don't like charts, but this is my little chart. 2014, the little red circle identifies the bleaching. We expected it to go down. I would have been okay if this would have stayed the same, but no, it went up. So what does this mean? We don't know. So 5% increase since 2014, slight decline following the bleaching event. Recovery increase since 2016. So, coral reef around the world have declined. My personal observations in my weekend with my grandparents have proven this. Scientific literature have also shown this. But death and full extinction does not have to be in the imminent future for coral reefs in the Acropora genus. My project shows that even with mass bleaching events, life after death can be achieved with great success in the Acropora genus. If we all work together and give coral a chance, they can truly have a great comeback. Thank you. Questions? Questions? Hilliard.
Wonderful presentation, Justin. I do have a question for you. In your personal opinion, what do you think the future of coral conservation looks like, and how can we as humans help contribute to the conservation?
Excellent question. Thank you, Hilly. So they're already doing things in the Caribbean, which is the management plant. They're planting, a lot of you maybe have seen the planting, the restoration of these. This is mostly done with Acropora species and genus. I believe our project has a lot to be studied. We have to learn a lot of things. What can we do as a whole? We have to add this story, this part of the news story, into our management and policy. So that's, I think, it's the next step. Hey, they can come back. It's not a deprimenting story of, you have no idea how many people in a coffee shop, oh, so you study coral. How does it feel that you're not going to have a job in 10 years? I get that a lot. But we might be able to have a job in 10 years. It shows that they're coming back. So we must put that in the story and not give up on the coral.
Question.
Yes.
What made the difference for the coral coming back in those photographs, and what were you actively doing?
Me, myself?
Well,
or
whatever
everyone?
the project was, yes.
Actively as a conservation effort, you say?
Yes. In other words, what made the coral come back?
We don't know. We're trying to figure that out. There's a lot of theories and belief, but that's what we're trying to. In Palmyra Island, they have no litter interaction with humans. So they were affected for the overall climate change. They bleach, just like all the corals in the Caribbean, but what made them rebound, and not only rebound in the same state, rebound greatly. We're trying to figure out how to add that to the future in our management in the Caribbean and other places.
Has this been seen in other areas of the world where this coral is?
Not fully. We've had a lot of research done in this coral just showing how it dies. And a lot of extensive research in the Caribbean, and it shows that at mass bleach, it died. The graph did not go up like this one. That's been the research that's been done. In other places, this same behavior, I do not think so, but